This week on Dreamland, we begin a 2-week exploration of what could probably have been the most important UFO event in history, the Phoenix Lights. That's right, the Phoenix Lights. And you've heard them say it was flares. It's all to be dismissed. It was nothing but flares. Not true. A big, fat lie. In fact, a lie, a carefully constructed lie. Don't listen. We're going to be talking to Dr. Lynn Katai, who was the first person to see the Phoenix Lights, and we'll be finding out why, because of Dr. Lynn, who she was, and how she reacted to the Phoenix Lights, this grew into such an enormous event. It all rested on Dr. Lynn Katai. You will find out why. For subscribers, this week we're going to be talking to Julie Ryder, who is a remarkable orb photographer. Now you say, oh, orbs, that's been proved, it's just dust on the camera lens. Not. In the subscriber area, you'll see, for example, diamond-shaped orbs. And why are they diamond-shaped? Because Julie and her group asked them to change shape and then took pictures, and this is what appeared. We are also on Whitley's Journal. There is a new journal about what we're trying to do, and as well for subscribers, a new meditation that begins a series of extremely powerful meditational movements or exercises in communication that work, that are entirely and completely real, and that are effective. So we're going to take this to a new level now, because when you look at things like the Phoenix Lights, when you look at things like the orbs, when you look at things like crop circles, what you are looking at is what the master of the key called conscious energy. It is here, it is making itself available to us, and we can respond in a coherent manner. We can take our experience of life to a higher level at this point. It is possible to do this now. We're also on Mysterious Powers. Anne is going to be talking about dowsing and how the remarkable ways in which this old practice has changed. Now, suddenly there's a dowser who's discovered he can alter events at a distance with dowsing and do all kinds of things with it. Also the same energy manifesting in another way. Read Whitley's Journal to get started on a perspective on this extraordinary energy that is all around us, that is available to us all now as the world changes in an entirely new way, beginning a 2-week process of learning how to think about this energy in a new way and how to communicate with it on Dreamland. This is Whitley Strieber. We'll be right back. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. I'm very pleased to welcome to the program a very, very special human being, Dr. Lynn Katai. Dr. Katai is, you may know her as Dr. Lynn of the Phoenix Lights. Dr. Lynn is more than she knows, I suspect, and probably will be surprised to hear that this program is going to connect in very important ways to certain people who will have some extraordinary experiences over the next couple of months. And it is about communication and exactly what does it mean to communicate with other levels of reality. The Phoenix Lights are without a doubt, the most extraordinary UFO event in history, and I say that without equivocation. It is the most well-documented UFO event. There have been some really silly and insulting attempts to debunk it, and you may have heard of those attempts. In fact, they were, of course, ballyhooed in all the wrong media places, but you're one of the couple of 100,000 people who listen to this radio program, and therefore you are aware of the fact that that's all a load of baloney, that something very real is happening, and quite a number of you are contactees and abductees, people who are highly sensitive to this, and this is the chance that this communication has to reach out in a whole new way. So I'd really like to welcome the person for whom the Phoenix Lights were lit Dr. Lynn, welcome to the program.
Oh, I really appreciate that introduction. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Well, it is indeed true. They were lit for you so that you could take this message out. People are selected, I think, very carefully. You were selected for your down-to-earth nature, your credibility, your lack of previous history in UFO material, etc., 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 and now you have created a wonderful book, The Phoenix Lights, which, if you read this book, folks, if you read no other UFO book this year, read The Phoenix Lights. This is not just another UFO story. It's an important communication from a higher level of reality. It is a place to begin if you wish to interact, and interaction is now possible for anybody on this planet. It wasn't before, not even a year or two ago, but you can initiate it if you wish, and if you understand enough about this will be meaningful to you. Dr. Lynn, let's start at the beginning as we learn get this amazing story. First, start by telling us where you were in life right before this happened, and how it came into your life.
Actually, it is intriguing, I must say, and I have felt almost an obligation to do what I've done. My life's work has been education and healing from the time I can remember. My undergraduate work was in secondary science education, and I even began thinking then of community education projects. In medical school I did as well, and they started even a new course concerning going out in the community and giving indigent children immunizations that weren't getting it. I couldn't understand if they weren't coming to the doctors, why weren't they going out to them? And we actually started a course at Temple University Medical School because of my inquiry. And then after medical school, got the idea to do community communications on the news. I thought, if anything, and that's a long story, I won't go into that, of how it came to be, but it was actually going into the indigent areas and seeing that they had nothing, that boarded up homes and one light bulb, but they had their television on all day. And thought, well, maybe we can reach people that way, and went to NBC with an idea, and they thought it was a great one, and started doing health reporting when Jessica Savage and Maura Krim were at the NBC affiliate in Philadelphia, and then an international syndication grew from that, which was wonderful for me because I got to be with my children as they were growing up as much as I could. And then on moving to Phoenix in 1980, started again doing health reporting for NBC, USA Cable, and so actually I was in private practice seeing kids drowning in substance abuse, and felt an obligation to do something constructive and compelling for them. Started my own company, Health Education Learning Programs, and actually the You Make It video and curriculum series that out of my own pocket and time, and it just, for whatever reason, I felt that it was important to do, and with great acclaim and awards and all that good stuff, which is rewarding, but the bottom line is that it really reaches kids by getting the truth out about vital health issues, and I've done an AIDS and teen pregnancy program as well in the You Make It series. And when this happened in 95, actually was the first time that my husband, who's also a prominent physician in the Valley, and I witnessed a very strange occurrence. I had, as well as he, had no interest or knowledge at all in this phenomenon. The only movies that we had seen concerning UFOs was E.T. and Close Encounters, which we enjoyed. It was entertaining, and our kids grew up with the wonderful messages. We have two boys, and Star Trek, was a fun thing to watch as a family with the wonderful messages. But other than that, really even stayed away from it because of the scary, portrayals and aliens and all this kind of thing. Just wasn't appealing, and I was too busy anyway doing all my other stuff. So when we did have a close sighting just yards from our home in 1995, my husband actually saw it first. We have we're high in a mountainside and have a panoramic view of the entire Phoenix skyline, which is kind of neat to look at, and we are quite familiar with what planes look like and car lights and street lights and so forth, and even flares. And one evening he calls me to our window. The whole wall was a window, and says, "Get over here quick." I was in a bath and jumped out of the bath because he never sounds alarmed, and really, literally yards from our property over a private desert area about 50, 75 feet above the ground, were 3 amber orbs in a triangle formation. One was on top, and 2 were very closely aligned underneath. And my first thought, of course, producing videos, was to get my video camera, but I didn't know how long it was going to last. I didn't want to miss anything, and something just told me to take it all in mentally. And as I stared at these orbs, and I call them orbs because the light did not extend outside the edge, the size, the color, the shape, and so forth, they were oval shape. There were 3 distinct objects. 1 was on top and 2 closely aligned underneath like a pyramid. The light within each orb was very different than any light I'd ever seen before. It was a very mesmerizing, soft, amber color throughout, uniform throughout. There was no glare at all. I mean, every other light out there glared. There was no hot spot in the middle that usually you see with a light bulb. And I looked underneath to see if anybody was producing this, and it was just dark. And I thought, if I don't get a picture of this, nobody's going to believe it. And I go running to the closet to grab my camera, and my husband calls me back. He says, "Get over here quick, one of them is disappearing." And as we watched, it was extraordinary. The top orb in place, and having watched Star Trek, for anybody out there that is familiar with the Klingon cloaking device, I really took note of if it moved, it did not budge. It didn't waver like the Klingon cloaking device wavers. It didn't take off. It just absolutely rigid in place. It was as if it was on a dimmer switch, and after it disappeared, it seemed like it was still there, but we didn't see it anymore. And I stepped out onto the balcony. I took a picture of the 2 lower orbs, and immediately noticed an eerie silence, as if time had stopped. It was really extraordinary, and I was staring at these orbs. I mean, just mesmerized. To me, it was very exciting, and I thought it just felt like an intelligent presence was watching. I have to admit that. And the thoughts running through my mind: who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I would love to meet you. Were going through my brain, and the next thing I remember, the left bottom orb started to disappear, and I quickly got a picture of that. And actually, that was the one picture that turned out at the time. Which to me only confirmed that we did see what we saw, and that something extraordinary did happen. But I didn't know what to do with it because I didn't know anybody.
No, because this came to you just out of nowhere in your life.
Oh yeah,
your husband
and
facilitated.
The only reason I remember the date actually is because it was the night before my birthday, and I thought it was so cool that this had happened on my birthday.
Now you tried to communicate in your mind at that point. Did you do that? You just sort of thought these thoughts without any real...
Yeah, it was just thoughts and I remember, vividly what I thought, because it really did feel that something was there watching me as closely as I was watching them.
Yes.
The orbs. And I have to say, after they all disappeared as well, that night, for weeks after, for about a month after, as I was outside walking the dogs around our pool area, which these lights were a little beyond that, it really felt like they were still there watching. It just felt like that.
Outside of you, not in you.
No, I mean, it felt like they were still there where I had witnessed them.
As if they were present but not visible.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And
this is perhaps, and this is the only thing I can relate it to, perhaps they were in another dimension. How
did you feel about what were your emotional reactions to the feeling of being watched?
It was a little eerie, but I have to say that the experience itself, and I keep going back to that experience in '95 when people ask me about different things that this could have been. The experience was very exciting for me. I just was like flabbergasted that, what is that? I mean, I don't know of any technology that we have that's like this. I've never seen anything or heard of anything that's like this, and yet it was real, and I did get a picture of it. I actually have more pictures that turned out later, but at the time I did have a picture that confirmed that it really did happen.
So at that point then, well, we're going to take a little break. Actually, we're coming up on the end of our first segment together. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland, and when we come back, get set to get deeper into what really is the most extraordinary UFO story of our time. We'll be right back. The Phoenix Lights, essential reading. Why? Because it shows your interest. The more you read of a book like that, the more your interest becomes known. It is noticed. The Phoenix Lights, get it from the unknowncountry.com store. Participate in this in every way that you possibly can. Do the meditations, listen to this material, read the book. This is Whitley Strieber. We're back with Dr. Lynn. The Phoenix Lights, the single most extraordinary and probably most important UFO event of our times. I know that's a big thing to say, but there were so many witnesses. It was so incontrovertible. Only the usual dark forces that surround the United States Air Force, speaking of dark forces, which is innocently engaged in furthering their ambitions. I say innocently. At one level, most of these people are quite innocent of what they don't know what they're doing, but there are those who do, and they orchestrated through the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, I would believe, and we'll talk about that later, an attempt to destroy the value of this communication, and it was pretty effective in some respects, and surprisingly so. But before we go on, let's go back to where Lynn was. It's the first marvelous night she's had this sighting. She's taken some pictures. She knows that something was there and feels a lingering presence around her. Lynn, what happened then?
Well, at that point, I had one picture that turned out, which was significant, because I actually caught what ended up to be the last picture that I took that night of one orb. The bottom left orb half disappeared, and the right orb still there, which was like, whoa. I mean, I really caught something amazing. But I didn't know what to do with it, and I didn't know anyone that was into the topic. I certainly wasn't. I didn't even know who to ask, and ended up putting it on our mantle because I found it interesting and sharing it with some of my friends. We kind of laughed about it, and then put it away. But I have to tell you, even though the picture was away, the thoughts weren't out of my mind. And every so often I would look out our window wondering if I'd ever find out what the heck that advanced technology was, if it ever would come back. And 2 years passed. Actually, it was January 22nd. I was lying in bed about 8 o'clock at night, and I noticed 3 amber orbs now in a line formation far west at a distance, hovering for a time. And I watched them, and I saw them each it sort of implode from the outside inwards, one by one, from right to left, almost identical to what I shot on March 13th, 2 months later, at 10 o'clock during the mass sighting. So, at any rate, I'm lying there, and I watched them, and they each faded away. It seemed to be, again, imploding from the outside inwards until they were gone. Didn't think much more about it till the following night. My husband was at a state board, medical board meeting. He's on several state and hospital boards and medical boards. And I happened to be at the sliding glass door that's perpendicular to that big window. And I now noticed that the same 3 amber orbs, huge amber orbs, are now in a line formation, just like the night before, but in front of South Mountain, which is actually right near the airport. They have red lights that blink on top of the mountain so that it warns the airplanes. And I knew it was in front of the mountain because these lights were behind it and above it. So the red lights were behind these unknowns and above it. And I thought, okay, enough. I'm getting my camera. And I ran downstairs, got my video camera, ran out to the pool, got about 18 seconds worth of video before the battery went dead. And I have to tell you, the battery was charged. So that was a little weird. But I ran inside. I hooked up the battery to be charged. And I ran outside. They were gone. About a half hour later, 8:30, my husband comes up the drive, and I walk outside. And I said, honey, remember I told you about the 3 amber orbs far west last night? Well, about half an hour ago, they were right in front of South Mountain. And as I'm pointing with my hand, they reappeared in the same spot. I kid you not. And I thought, oh, my God, there they are again. And I said, I've got to get a picture of this. And I do believe everything happens for a reason, and I'm thankful that I had to get my 35 millimeter, because what happened was that as I ran upstairs and got out on the balcony to shoot the 3 amber orbs in a row, suddenly 6 amber orbs in an equidistant line over a mile wide, looking at the landscaping, appeared above the 3. It was startling. It was unnerving. Having not had an explanation for the 95 sighting, the closed sighting, I wondered, oh, my God, is this a mothership or a fleet or what is going on here? It was so unusual, and I started clicking away. And in retrospect, because these pictures actually did not turn out at the time till a week after the mass sighting, but I stood there taking 6 pictures head-on of this unexplained phenomena turning into a V shape as the 3 bottom orbs were disappearing. The top formation was turning into a V. When the 3 orbs were just about gone, I ran inside, called, picked up the paper, because, again, it was unnerving, and I wanted to find out what the heck it was, and called the Arizona Republic newspaper city desk and said, you've got to get somebody out there quick. There's strange lights in front of South Mountain. Have somebody take a picture, and please tell me what it is. After I got done my sentence, they were gone. So we didn't have much more of a conversation. It was frustrating, and did not sleep that well that night. By the next morning, I got up and I figured, there has to be a logical explanation here. Somebody has to know what they are. My husband and I both saw the same thing, and I did get some on video. So I called the city desk again, and I asked, did anybody call last night to report strange lights in front of South Mountain? And she gets off the phone. She comes right back on. She says, nope, nobody called. Well, I know I called. So I said, well, we did see something, and I'm just trying to hunt down what it might have been. She says, sometimes Luke Air Force Base sends off experimental maneuvers, and they don't tell the public about it. Well, that sounded reasonable, but I wanted to make sure. So I called Luke Air Force Base, and a woman lieutenant got on the phone, and I tried to be very professional. My husband and I are both physicians. We live mountainside in Paradise Valley, and we saw some strange lights appear in front of South Mountain last night. Could you tell me what they might have been? And I have to say, Whitley, from the get-go, she had an attitude. Well, they didn't come in to Luke Air Force Base, and they didn't come out from here, so we had nothing to do with it. And I said, well, we did see the same thing, and I did get some on video. Somebody's got to know what they were. They were really extraordinary. She said, I wouldn't have any idea. And I said, you know a UFO organization? She said, I wouldn't have that information. And I said, okay, I want to sleep tonight. Please help me out here. And she said, well, you said it was in front of South Mountain. Maybe somebody at the airport saw something. So I thought, okay, let me call the FAA and see. So I called the FAA. I told them the same story, and the lady was very kind. She said, maybe one of the air traffic controllers saw something last night, and let me find out. So she gets off. She leaves me hanging for over 5 minutes, finally gets back on, and she says, actually, one of the air traffic controllers that was here last night is here this morning. I said, oh. And he did see something strange. He saw some strange lights. I said, I'd love to talk to him, please.
Now, this is most amazing because this hardly ever happens. So listen up, folks.
This is
quite
great.
A remarkable part of this story. This is the beginning of something huge.
Anyway, finally, he gets on the phone, and we have met, and he's a really mellow, kind guy. And I have to tell you, he was more excited than me. He said, did you see the 6 lights that were equidistant from each other hovering in a formation last night at 8:30? And I said, yes, that's why I'm calling. He said, you're at a distance? I said, yeah, I'm in Paradise Valley. He said, I can't believe you saw them. We actually saw 3 at 8 o'clock. And I said, well, I saw them too. I got them on video. He said, when 8 o'clock, 3 showed up. They looked on radar, and they did not show up on radar, and then they disappeared. At 8:30, these 6 lights popped up, did not show up on radar. They thought that was really bizarre. What could it possibly be? It was like nothing they had ever seen before. And he is also a meteorologist, by the way. And he said they picked up their binoculars to take a look, and he did state that, first they thought maybe it was skydivers with lights, but they were so equidistant, they were so perfectly aligned, that would be impossible. And then he thought it could never be flares because they look totally different from what flares look like. And they picked up their binoculars to take a look, and his description was there were 6 points of light that totally equidistant from each other that seemed to be attached to something, but they couldn't see what it was attached to, and it slowly moved in tandem, in synchrony, in his words, behind South Mountain and out of view.
And now this, of course, is important because there would eventually be a debunking explanation that involved that very mountain. So let's keep going.
So I said to him, so what were they? And there was silence. And he said, beats me. And I said, wait a minute, you're an air traffic controller. You're supposed to know what's in our airspace. And he said, well, you've really piqued my interest now that you've called. Let me ask around and I'll call you back. Which I was delighted, and I brought up my video camera, stuck it into electricity just so to make sure that into the plug, just to make sure it would work if they did come back, and they did. Each night, continuing in January of '97, there were usually 3 sightings in the same area, about 5 to 10 minutes apart, of 2 orbs in very rigid formation. And even though the video, I have to say, does not do it justice, because in the video they look much smaller, they flicker, they're white, it still was compelling that they would stay in these formations for so long, sometimes 7 minutes. And at any rate, after the end of January, all of February, there were no lights. And I thought again, oh, geez, I'll never find out what these things were. And interestingly, too, it wasn't until a year after, when I was really intensely in an investigation of what the source and meaning of these things were, that I found out that there was a mass sighting also in St. Petersburg, Russia, February 19th, 1997, where several people got video, which turned out to be identical to the pictures that I took in January, which is, pretty neat in itself.
That's quite amazing.
Had a similar sighting.
It's quite amazing.
It sure is.
And absolutely.
And then the amber orbs at a distance started showing up again March 1st. And again, I felt compelled, I have to admit it. I mean, when these things showed up, they're big. It's exciting to me. And I really felt compelled to go out and shoot them. For whatever reason, I had to get them on videotape. And by the end of the week, it was like, okay, I mean, this is like taking over my life. My husband was getting a little ruffled. We had no idea what they were. And I figured, you know what? Let me start calling around or find out, showing the video to my friends and seeing if anybody knows anybody I can show this to. And this is how close I was, or not close.
Right.
A friend of a friend had a neighbor who had a friend who knew the past president of MUFON. So I call him up. I'm not kidding. This is the truth. I call him up and I tell him that I have one picture from '95 sighting, a close sighting, and I've been videotaping these amber orbs at a distance. Now, interestingly, he had not heard anything, but after the mass sighting, there were a number of people that came forward that said they also saw these amber orbs the first week in March. But at any rate, at that point, he refers me to a field investigator. I call him up. We set an appointment for the following Wednesday. He calls up Tuesday, leaves a message that the now State Director Tom Taylor of MUFON wanted to join us, and his mother had died that Saturday, and the funeral was the next morning. Could we postpone the meeting?
And we're going to find out in just a couple of minutes what the extraordinary result of that was, how very strange. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We'll be right back. The Phoenix Lights Essential Reading. Why? Because it shows your interest. The more you read of a book like that, the more your interest becomes known. It is noticed. The Phoenix Lights. Get it from the unknowncountry.com store. Participate in this in every way that you possibly can. Do the meditations. Listen to this material. Read the book. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We're talking to Dr. Lynn Katai. Dr. Lynn, her website is thephoenixlights.net. That's www.thephoenixlights.net. And you can go there and look at some of the pictures that she's talking about. Quite interesting. Her book, The Phoenix Lights, will take you step by step in an absolutely amazing and unexpected direction. For those of you who are ready for contact on this level, it's time now. And I think you're understanding me. The signals are beginning to come in, and it is time. So take heed of that. Now, after you tried to have the meeting with the MUFON director, it was mysteriously put off. What happened then?
Again, I feel everything happens for a reason, and for whatever that reason is, Thursday night was March 13th. And the only time I had open for the next couple of weeks was Friday morning, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind meeting me at 10 o'clock the next morning, which was the 14th, and he agreed. The 13th, I was lying in bed, and I saw one huge amber light appear far west, just like that first night in January of 97. And I thought, I have enough on videotape to show this fellow the next morning. I'm not going to jump up and photograph it, but I did note the time, which was 8:20. Interestingly, we had several reports, including a crewman who allegedly called the UFO Reporting Center, Peter Davenport, to report that this mile-long triangle craft that traversed from upstate Arizona through the most populated corridor of Arizona down to Tucson and back to Phoenix was actually, thousands of people, by the way, were outside looking up at the sky at the Hale-Bopp comet, which makes this even more intriguing because people were outside actually looking up at the sky at the time when this phenomenon passed over, which seems that whoever did this actually really wanted to be seen. But at any rate, I see this one amber light far south, and that was far west, and that was when this mile-long triangle craft was traversing supposedly over 7th Avenue and Indian School, right over the city towards the airport. Now, an hour later, 9:20, I noticed one amber orb far south, which is when witnesses described this mile-long triangle traversing near Tucson. Now, for me, that was very curious because this was the first time I saw these amber orbs appear in totally separate places in the sky and a whole hour apart. Usually they appeared in threes, and instead of 3, 5 to 10 minutes apart in the same area. And so I just noted the time. Well, about 10 o'clock, the news is just starting on TV. Both my husband and I simultaneously jumped from the bed as we see this huge formation, the same formation, appear in the same location of these 6 lights across. At 10 o'clock, my husband says, "Get the camera quick." I grab the camera, and remember, at that time, the pictures from the 2 months before that big sighting had not turned out. I was told those pictures were blank. And so I was thrilled that I could get some on video. By the time I got it focused, 3 had disappeared, and I got the 3 points of light over the city, which has become one of the 4 signature videos of the March 13th event.
Right.
At any rate, I was excited that I got something from that sighting, and walked in the next morning to the field investigator's office at 10 o'clock, and the first thing he said to me, "Did you see the big sighting last night?" And I said, "Well, I did see something very similar to what I saw that I told you, 2 months ago." He says, No, you don't understand. Hundreds, if not thousands of people were outside looking at the Hale-Bopp comet, and they saw this mile-long triangle craft, or some people saw lights attached to something in a V formation traverse the whole state, and the phone's been ringing off the hook, and people have been calling the news stations and the police, Luke Air Force Base, and NBC will be here in a half an hour to interview him. And I said, whoa, I used to work for NBC in the early 80s. They may recognize me. I'm out of here. I said, but I do want to help. So please because I didn't know what we were dealing with, whether it was a hoax or military or whatever, but I wanted to help and show people what we saw. So I said, why don't you take a sample of the video from last night, and you're welcome to share it with the media, and if they'd like to call and chat over the phone, I'm happy to do that as well. Well, the phone did not stop all day, I have to tell you, and they did try to talk me into, being in the shadows or, whatever to do this anonymously, but I really didn't want any part of the media at that point, and I was quite content to just chat over the phone, and by 4:30 the next afternoon, that following day, my video was plastered on every news station, and it was big news here in Arizona, and by 10 o'clock, a couple other videos, which in my estimation are even more spectacular than mine, the Kristen's video that shows those 8 lights in kind of a curve for, equidistant formation, and Tom King's video is just spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. These are very famous videos.
And I have that on my website, by the way. I have a couple of videos on there that show, you can see. And
you can go to thephoenixlights.net and you can actually watch these videos.
Right. And Tom King's look like an arrowhead. These lights are absolutely attached to something.
Yes.
The data speaks for itself. which makes it a lot easier for me to come forward, but still took me a long time and a lot of soul searching until I decided to do that.
Now, there was subsequently, once we get to this point, an enormous a media response to this. This was the first time that there had been this kind of human response to one of these events. The previous event, similar event, took place over Washington, D.C. in July of 1952, I believe.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it was equally witnessed by thousands, was dismissed by the military as swamp gas, and
or
meteorites, and essentially rejected. And then there was silence for a very long time, and then another attempt is made, and suddenly a large number of people turn in this direction. They looked up, and now what occurred was that there was a substantial amount of investigation. Jim Delatoso became involved.
Although I have to tell you, at the beginning, which was very frustrating for many, many people here, including myself, the TV media really stepped on this. I mean, they were great. And, you know, I have to tell you, the print media there wasn't, for like 5 days, there wasn't anything at all. I mean, it was just like it never happened. And when witnesses, and again, there were thousands of witnesses, and many of them would come forward and say, look, I saw something unusual. Why isn't there an investigation? And I can't tell you how frustrating it was that military and government officials would say, what happened March 13th? Nothing happened March 13th. I mean, it was like that kind of a reaction that was like, it was uncanny. It just was uncanny. And it wasn't until really certainly Jim Delatoso, who turned out to be, you know, one of the main investigators in this, if not the main investigator, and Mike Tanner of Village Labs.
And he paid dearly for it, too.
Pardon me?
He paid dearly for it.
Well, yeah. I mean, it became the clearinghouse for people, and he had a database that was just so amazing. In fact, it wasn't until a week after the mass sighting itself, when he was on TV showing my video and then also other videos worldwide of these amber orbs and triangle formation, that I became aware for the very first time that this was happening worldwide, that these unexplained sightings were happening worldwide. I had no idea. I had no clue about this at all, and knew that he was the guy that I had to show my pictures to, which at that point, that night, and again, the month after the Phoenix Lights, a lot of strange things happened to me personally, including telepathy that night. I was tossing and turning with the persistent thought, take the negatives back, there's something in the negatives, take the negatives back, to where in the morning it was like, okay, I'll take the negatives back. I would have never thought to do that on my own. I just wouldn't have thought it. The developer told me they were blank, and I believed the developer, and I put them away. Thank goodness I put them away. And at that point I did take them out, took them to a developer and said, you know, I mean, they look blank, but maybe they're just lights. Maybe there's something there we didn't find before. Could you work on this? And came back with 4 stunning pictures that were unbelievable. And that's when I first realized I had those pictures head-on turning into a V of the January 23rd, 1997 sighting. And from then on, I mean, Jim was the guy I had to get together with, and he was really the only one that knew for a long, long time, actually until this book came out, that I did have this other data that I was keeping confidential until I was sure that it was unexplained, that I did my homework and went to great lengths, not only with Jim, but with the University of Arizona Optical Science Department and Conscious Study Department, Dr. Gary Schwartz, Harvard.
Yes, we've had Dr. Schwartz on this program.
Oh, he's wonderful.
Yeah, he is this very special, extraordinary man.
He has helped me so much to believe that this is real as well, and wrote the introduction to my book, and the Brooks Institute of Photography. They were so helpful. I mean, across the board, no matter who I showed this to, and I really took great lengths to do my homework, I was told over and over again that my photographic data is totally unique. It defies physics, the law of physics as we know it. Definitely not anything that we know of that has been built or deployed or whatever here on Earth, and needs to be shared. And also, just you know, to let you know, I mean, I'm still flabbergasted that no one else in history, and I guess this makes them even more unique and special, has ever shot photographic evidence from the same location before, during, and after an historic mass sighting.
And it's one of the many things that makes this so unique. And we're going to take a break in just a couple of about 45 seconds. And before we do that, though, what I'm going to be talking about next when we come back is the dark side of this, the coming of Martin, and all that followed thereafter. Because it does have a dark side. Somebody was watching this besides friendly folks interested on the television. Someone with a very much different view of everything and a very much different idea of how this might come about. Somebody deeply embedded in the United States government who had claws on the ends of their fingers. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We'll be right back. The Phoenix Lights essential reading. Why? Because it shows your interest. The more you read of a book like that, the more your interest becomes known. It is noticed. The Phoenix Lights. Get it from the unknowncountry.com store. Participate in this in every way that you possibly can. Do the meditations. Listen to this material. Read the book. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We're back with Dr. Lynn. The Phoenix Lights, the most important of all UFO events. There is no more important UFO event, and Dr. Lynn was at the center of it. It began when she looked up and took a picture, and it went from there to being the most extensively documented UFO event ever. There has never been one like it. And in this context, Dr. Lynn had a wonderful experience with people like Jim Delatoso, with people from MUFON, with Bill Hamilton, all struggling to understand. And then came Martin. And what did Martin have to say?
Well, I have to tell you, I tried to be kind in the book, even with my military investigation. And as you can see, I started keeping a diary, a journal, after I found out this was happening worldwide, just for my own peace of mind and my own curiosity and my own investigation, personal investigation, is the source and meaning of what I saw and witnessed, and ended up with a 750-page journal. Throughout this, I have to tell you, the witness reports were incredible. The investigators that were trying to investigate this were just so open and wonderful, and Village Labs was open to anyone who came there to share, and so many people did. Very, very credible people from doctors, lawyers, police, pilots, even air traffic controllers, etc. One person came out, and I named him Martin. Again, I tried to be kind to people. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I did want to tell the story, and I thought it was important to just share that for whatever reason, I don't know if it was a personal vendetta or, just maliciousness from another, agenda. I really don't know that for sure, but I do know that for whatever reason, this gentleman was just trying to debunk all the hard evidence, all the credible witness reports, by stating that he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, without any investigation or explanation from the military or government, I might add, that these were flares. And he just pounded the media and sent defamatory letters about Jim Delatoso and his analysis, which by the way, was backed up. I had met with the University of Arizona Optical Science Department, which at the time was headed by Dr. Richard Powell, who was just very open to learning.
And tell us his credentials.
Pardon me?
Tell us Dr. Powell's credentials.
He actually worked on a Star Wars technology, and he's now vice president of research at the University of Arizona. Very respected man.
A very highly respected man.
Very highly respected.
And Martin, his credentials.
I really don't think he has much of any.
No credentials.
Mm-mm.
But that doesn't
Not
mean
that I ever saw.
that doesn't mean that people did not leap at the chance to use this, and it grew like a cancer, didn't it?
It really did. I mean, he called Art Bell show. He called every news station. So finally, he got a really novice, I might say kindly, reporter and a cameraman to go out with him to the gunnery range to look at flares to prove that it was flares. Now, first of all, this Martin never saw the real sighting, number one, because I asked him personally if he had. And number two, he decided that I don't know why, and he wouldn't really explain why, but he decided they were flares, and this novice reporter and cameraman looked at the video. And again, in the videos do not do the real phenomena justice. They're white, they flicker, but in their estimation, they were identical, okay, which you can't even get close. If you go on my website and look at the difference between flares and my data, it's just significantly different. I mean, flares, we know, they drop, they can't see information.
Her website is thephoenixlights.net. Go ahead.
Thank you. Flares drop. They can never say information, particularly triangle formations or equidistant line formations. They reflect the ground. There's giant smoke trails from it. They're white. They flicker frantically. They move erratically. Totally different from what our unknowns were. And yet this fellow just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it until finally this reporter came out with a story on the news that that's what they were. They were flares. Well, it really didn't catch on too much until what happened was that June 18th, to be exact, USA Today came out with a beautiful, huge article really opening up this whole phenomenon to the world. Before that, yes, there were some television programs and some radio talk, but really not big media participation. And suddenly, media from all over the world converged on Arizona. Okay, now this is months after the sighting, no investigation, no explanation. In fact, sadly, Symington, who was the governor at the time, called a press conference to show everybody who did the Phoenix Lights, and they walk out one of his aides in a alien costume.
I remember it well.
Which I have to tell you, to the people who really saw this thing and were very touched and moved by the whole experience, and they knew they had experienced something extraordinary and everybody was blowing it up, this was really a slap in the face. And anyway, after the only governmental person that even came out to inquire about this was Councilwoman Frances Barwood.
And where is Councilman Barwood now?
She has actually moved to upstate Arizona. At the time, she hadn't seen the sighting, but so many of her constituents, and this was a month or two after the mass sighting, that she asked in a council meeting, only because it ended up to be like 700 people had called her to say, why isn't there an investigation, that she innocently asked at a council meeting, why, I've gotten calls from my constituents. A TV crew had asked her, why wasn't there an investigation? Maybe we should look into it. Well, she got plastered. She really got plastered, especially in the print media, where they made cartoons that she's seeing little green men and all kinds of things. It was very scary for me. I mean, especially thinking that,
of course, because you have also
not with what I have, and here I was seeing that anybody that did come forward was really being ostracized and ridiculed and all that, which was very sad. At any rate, it really was irresponsible journalism.
Now, we need to, I want to move right along here, and I want to move on into another kind of unexpected area, and that is where you are now. In what exactly would you do if the lights showed up again?
They have.
When?
When? Actually, there's so much to this story. If you read in the book, what happened was that about a year later, after the Phoenix Lights mass sighting on March 13th, and again, the government and military didn't come out with their explanation until a month after, July 24th, a month after the USA Today article. I mean, they were being hounded by everyone for an investigation and explanation. Suddenly, I get a call, because I had called around, and my conversations, several of them are written in the book, which are interesting in themselves because the military was more interested in what I had than giving an explanation for it. They didn't have a clue. I mean, some of them even admitted they were curious what it was. But at any rate, suddenly this big announcement comes at we forgot to look at the log of the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off flares. So that's how that essentially got started, and which was, okay, you know what? I was open to any logical explanation. I pushed my entire professional life aside to search for one for 4 years. And again, we said, fine, if it's Air National Guard that sent off flares, reenact it. Well, of course, nobody else knew except Jim Delatoso and myself that I had pictures, 35-millimeter pictures, of the same formation in the same location as March 13th. The Maryland Air National Guard was not in town on January 97. So if some other Air National Guard had done this, it would have been a miracle to have the same formation in the same location if it was flares. You know what I mean? It's just impossible in our laws of physics because of weather conditions and air current and all that. It's just absolutely impossible. So we were curious, would they reenact it or not? Well, they didn't for 3 years. But the year after the mass sighting, to answer your question, it was January 98, and it was a very eerie fog that whole weekend, and even my husband and I joked they could be out there, kiddingly, and we wouldn't even know it because you couldn't even see beyond our street. It was very eerie, and they even said so in the paper. And that Monday night, it was starting to clear up a little bit, and we were out on our balcony, and there was still a fog over the city, but suddenly 2 amber lights appeared, one on top of the other, and we looked at each other and we said, whoa, are they back? Well, they were muted a little bit because of the fog, so I didn't want to get everybody all excited, but I did take video of it. In the video, they looked very similar. And I had remembered what the University of Arizona had told me, if they do come back, even though they couldn't definitively define what they were, I should get more professional cameras, because I was just using a Canon Telemax at the time. And I went out the next morning, got a Pentax top of the line with a tel lens and a star filter, and took 3 sightings that night of these amber orbs. Again, they were showing up in the same location. The pictures turned out spectacularly. I walked into Village Labs on the following morning, and I said, you know what, I just had a feeling they were coming back that night. Maybe we should get together the 3 other people that were video witnesses March 13th. By then, by the way, other people around the city had seen these lights, were calling police and news and so forth.
Right.
And the media was even there. They interviewed McCain that day, in fact,
right,
about the lights, and he kind of said, well, we don't know what they are. You know, some people have reported strange lights. But nonetheless, that night we had 4 people, north, south, east, and west, that were situated to get a 20-minute array, which was quite different than March 13th. But nonetheless, it was absolutely exciting and amazing, and we're talking mirror images 40 miles apart, okay, and giant triangles in the sky, and lights. The Rainbow Valley couple that were taking their videos, which is so compelling. The lights appear, then they disappear. They appear in the same exact spot. They disappear. They reappear in the same exact spot. The data, the footage, the video, the pictures speak for themselves. Just astounding. And
Lynn,
the next morning,
we have roared through an entire radio program here.
Uh-oh.
And I think that what we're going to do is you and I are going to go, if you have time, we're going to do 2 radio programs.
Absolutely. There's a lot more to this story.
There's a lot more to this story. So we're going to be back next week with Dr. Lynn again. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland, and we will be continuing with this gigantic story next week on Dreamland. Will be, well, let's see, I'm losing my thread here because I'm not used to doing it quite this way. Next up, Linda Moulton Howe. One reporter who loves mysteries is radio's leading science journalist, Linda Moulton Howe. She's an Emmy Award-winning TV producer, documentary filmmaker, and writer, and the reporter and editor for EarthFiles.com, the Internet's most respected edge science website. Today, she has a special report for us on those majestic 12 documents, new indications about their authenticity. Here she is from the X Conference in Washington, D.C., Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Whitley. Well, you know, it was back in 1995 that aerospace engineer Bob Wood, who had worked for McDonnell Douglas for 43 years, began studying photo blow-ups from 35-millimeter black and white negatives that had been sent anonymously to Don Berliner, who is now chairman of the Fund for UFO Research in Maryland. The 35-millimeter negatives turned out to be the now famous Psalm 101 training manual classified by the Majestic 12 group established by President Harry Truman in 1947. The title of that Psalm 101 document, which continues to hold up over time as authentic, is Extraterrestrial Entities and Technology Recovery and Disposal. The publication date was April 1954, and the source, the United States War Office. Since 1995, Bob Wood and his son Ryan have now accumulated 800 pages of such classified documents and 3,000 pages of unclassified, all related to the issue of government knowledge and cover-up about the interaction of something classified in their own documents as extraterrestrial biological entities with this planet. Now, this weekend at this first annual Exopolitics Expo in Gaithersburg, Maryland, Bob and Ryan Wood will be speaking about the latest news in the ongoing efforts to authenticate these classified, or these pages classified as Majestic 12 documents. And we're going to learn something extraordinary about the Psalm 101 document. But first, and Bob is with me now for Dreamland Online, we're going to start with what has been an extraordinary experience for me to be with Bob. And right now I am looking at a folder he has on his lap. These are old pages. They are typed. They are written over. And some we're going to talk about even show burn marks. And the one that I'm looking at right now with handwriting at the top, written in 1954, a typed manuscript that says Chapter 12, the U.S. Air Force and Flying Saucers, was written by a man named Brendan Bowen. He was working in advertising his life, but with an avid obsession about trying to understand what were these discs flying around in the skies of the United States and being reported about. And the first sentence says, trying to understand the attitude and sections and actions of the U.S. Air Force with regard to flying saucers is like trying to unravel the riddle of the Sphinx, with handwriting at the top, written in 1954, and this is the surprise. There is a red stamp on this old typed manuscript, Top Secret Magic. Bob Wood, what is the story behind Top Secret Magic on this old manuscript?
Well, thank you, Linda. That was one of the most exciting events of my quest for understanding these documents, was the time when I was sitting in a Denny's restaurant and Tim Cooper opened a package that he said he just received, and out from the package came 355 pages of old manuscript. And this was a book that a fellow by the name of Vernon Bowen had written when he was an advertising executive in New York in 1950 to 1960. It was a kind of a hobby that he did all this time. And I've tracked down his survivors, and he has one son, Patrick, who remembered his father's interest in this topic. And clearly, the manuscript is basically his one man's view of what was going on in the 50s and flying saucers. He put together everything he could find in the library, and then because he was a very loyal American, lent it to somebody, a friend of his, to make sure that he wasn't publishing anything inappropriate. And so this manuscript came back from the Freedom of Information Office at Fort Meade in 1999 to Tim Cooper in this envelope that I saw.
And because he was a patriot, what had he done with this manuscript that must have gone in some circuitous route to the U.S. Air Force, and then what?
Well, the manuscript, when it came back, was stamped, for the most part, confidential, but the chapter that Linda's looking at here, Chapter 12 on the U.S. Air Force and flying saucers, they elected to stamp top secret. But the thing about the manuscript that was interesting was that there was a lot of chirography, or in other words, handwriting around the edges, written by the Air Force personnel who'd been studying it since 1961. And I've had these ink samples taken. You know, you can do that just by punching out a little tiny dot, and then by liquid chromatography, why you can find out how old the ink is. And we found that the ink dates from the 1970s kind of pen. And one of the ink marks is Project Moondust, which in effect authenticates the existence of that project, which was the recovery, as you know, of crashed flying saucers. And another comment here is C. Twining's 9/23/47 secret report to the Chief of Staff, U.S. Air Force. And again, that confirms the White Hot report that is part of the Majestic program's record.
And these are handwritten on the sides of this manuscript, this ink analyzed, not having been produced before not later than 1975. And Bob, is it fair to say that the implication of the red top secret / magic that we have seen on the Psalm 101 document and others implies that when Mr. Bowen sent this manuscript, he would only know to send it to the Air Force, and it ends up with a red top secret magic? Does that imply that the Air Force must have known, or somebody did, to send this to Majestic 12?
Yes, that's exactly what it implies. Clearly, an Air Force officer would know that there was a procedure and follow that procedure, and sooner or later it went to the people who have the stamp. All we know is that we're looking at a clearly authentic stamp. We've had the stamp checked, too, the ink on the stamp, and it does not correlate with any of the modern inks that are used for stamp pads today.
And as I go through Bob's amazing notebook of these original old fragile papers that are falling apart, there is one that has scorch marks on it, top secret MJ-12, Central Intelligence Agency, from Director of Central Intelligence, MJ-1, and then it appears to be directed to MJ-2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it references, almost burned away, Project Majestic and Jehovah, Project Eviro, Project Parasite, Project Perihelion. And in the context of this memo, original carbon, do not remove, and it's burned, it is talking about Lancer, that we know today was JFK. And Bob, can you read what this says?
The sentence here says, please evaluate each draft on its own merit with the goal of finding acceptable solutions in which all can agree on. As you must know, Lancer has made some inquiries regarding our activities which we cannot allow. And then the other pages deal with various aspects of of code words that clearly have a deep meaning which we don't thoroughly understand. But the pages are stamped CI, which is counterintelligence, and that stamp has been confirmed with people who have seen the CIA counterintelligence stamp from that era. Now, I don't have one of those to show for comparison as an exemplar, but I believe that would be axiomatic, that would happen. We could show that they were clearly authentic. So we're looking at authentic material that came from the counterintelligence people in the CIA, dealing with not only the Majestic program, but also with the JFK assassination.
And stressing again that this typed sentence on this burn page, you must know Lancer JFK, the President of the United States, has made some inquiries regarding our activities, that is Majestic 12, which we cannot allow. And what in those few words is behind or connected to the fate of Kennedy is one of the biggest questions in American history. And also, in this context of trying to keep this suppressed at all costs in the interests of national security, there was a lot of shredding and a lot of orders to destroy copies of things, and one of those is related to the Psalm 101 document. And this is the amazing testimony of a man named Dale Bailey. And Bob, we're going to be coming up to a break in about a minute, but let's start, and we can segue into the next segment about this amazing description of a man who may have been assigned to destroy.
Stan Friedman gets a lot of phone calls from people, and he doesn't believe them until he checks them out. So he told me back in 1997 there was a fellow by the name of Dale Bailey who claimed to have destroyed some government documents. And so Ryan and I visited with Dale near La Crosse, Wisconsin, and found out that he claimed to have been a yeoman destroying documents at the request of his boss, Michaelis. And these documents were top secret, even though he only had a secret clearance. And some of them had to do with UFOs. He saw the original Special Operations Manual, he in a different format, and he saw the Eisenhower briefing document, but with the attachments. And on the attachments, there were notations having to do with the aliens. So that's something you see that nobody has ever seen before.
And when we come back after this break, we will talk more about the details of the attachments. This is Linda Moulton Howe, reporter and editor of EarthFiles.com, reporting for Dreamland.
This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We'll be right back. The work of Linda Moulton Howe, the amazing work of Linda Moulton Howe, the world's greatest reporter of edge news and edge topics. She has got a website, earthfiles.com. Go there frequently. You will never forget what you find on earthfiles.com. The best website, the best reporting of its kind in the world. Linda Moulton Howe, earthfiles.com. Don't miss a single day.
Bob, let's go into the details of what Dale Bailey can recall that he saw with his own eyes about the attachments that we have all for years wanted to know when we have seen these documents, whether they came in 35 millimeter or burned or wherever they've been. There's always these intriguing titles about attachments that none of us have ever seen. What did Dale Bailey, in his own words, say?
Well, Ryan and I interviewed him for about an hour, and we had a recording going, and of course that was known to everybody. And we transcribed that recording, and I've studied that transcription. I've selected the highlights from that transcription of what I thought were the most important things. And the things that caught my attention was the fact that he saw the attachments to the Eisenhower briefing document. As far as I know, nobody has ever claimed to have seen those. And the ones that he saw talked about a biological examination, and there were marginalia, that is, there were notations in the margins, those kind of documents. Nothing was blacked out on it, and it was on onion skin paper. He also saw the Truman memo, but the Truman memo, he saw White House paper, and that White House paper was embossed. He could run his fingers over it, and he said that really impressed him. And he said also he saw the CIA paper had embossing on it. So he was looking at some high-level stuff directly from the CIA. And what interested me particularly because of our known tendencies of our armed forces to kind of keep some things to themselves. He saw a caveat, Navy eyes only. This was a stamp that was been prepared for Navy use, saying Navy eyes only. And I don't know that DOD has ever approved the use of such a stamp. I wouldn't be surprised if they had. But his special operation manual, the one that he saw, was a different size from the one that we believe to be the authentic one. It was cream-colored, and it had black print. It was letter size, 8.5 by 11 or 8 by 10, at least in the copy that he had, which just means that it was maybe a different version. This was 1976 or 7, and the original one was 1954.
Is the implication, then, that the 1954 April might have been the first one, because that would have only been from 47, that would only have been 7 years after all the controversy about Roswell, and that the April 1954 Psalm 101 that you received, the 35 millimeter negatives that we've all seen and gone over, that is really extraordinary because it makes no bones about extraterrestrial biological entities and technology, and basically is a training manual to government agents of some form about how to go out and retrieve these entities in the technology. Is the implication then that over from 50s, 60s into the 70s that this training manual kept being revised and updated?
Well, it could be that they were being revised and updated, but there's another possibility, and that is that since he was destroying really old documents, that these are documents that just had sat there for a long, long time, and the Admiral wanted to get rid of them. So we don't really know. We don't have a discriminator on that point. It's certainly possible that once they had created such a manual, they would have had some updates. In fact, the numbering on the manual suggested this was the first one of the series.
Now, can you remember in talking to him if in those notations on that very provocative area that had to do with biological examination, did he remember any content in the text or in the written notes?
No, Dale was at a little disadvantage because it was like 23 years or so since he had seen them. And besides that, the circumstances under which he saw them were a little strange. He was, as they say, a yeoman, which means a secretary for the Navy, but he was a conscientious objector, and he actually borrowed some of these documents and ran copies of them and then gave them to this group that was trying to. It was an anti-American group kind of thing. So he was basically arrested, and I think he served some time. So actually, here's the case of a guy whose testimony initially might not have very high credibility, but as we talked to him, it was very clear that every aspect of his tale was exactly the same. He was quite candid and very open with Ryan and me, and we had no doubt on understanding and agreeing that his story was real.
I talked once to a man who worked for the FBI in San Francisco, and he got in touch with me to tell me that he was being assigned to destroy in the San Francisco office in a shredder what he said had to be hundreds of pages concerning UFOs. And this is a conversation that goes back to the mid-'80s. He unfortunately did not do what Timothy Cooper's father did, which was to copy and send to me, but he was reporting. Now we are talking about a man who also had an order to destroy. The FBI man told me he was so astonished that that's why he reached out to just at least let me know because of the work I was doing. Did Mr. Bailey express to you any reaction he had to what he was seeing and reading?
Yeah, he clearly was amazed and excited that such a program existed and seemed to be real. And when he went past his amazement, he had a little trouble following the orders because he was only cleared through secret, and he was being asked to destroy top secret material, and so he actually raised this question with his boss, and his boss says, well, that's okay, we're here to monitor you, don't worry about it. So I had the feeling that the controls in that office were not all the Navy would have wanted.
Well, this leads to so many people attack and say, you can't possibly have any real documents, because none of the government that is doing classifications at an alleged Majestic 12 level, maybe for their eyes only and not even beyond a president's, how could these ever have really reached your hands? Could you talk about some of the current evidence that you have, at least concerning Timothy Cooper, who, as I understand it, it was his father who worked in a printing office at White Sands, who got the original copies, who did copy material that stunned him. And over the 90s, you've had this extraordinary opportunity to meet and talk with Timothy Cooper, have documents handed to you firsthand, but you've also received at least 6 times, I believe, material from Timothy Cooper by mail. What is the status of authentication concerning the mailing?
Well, Tim Cooper received materials on 10 different times, and of those 10 times, 4 were personal deliveries from people he knew, some of whose identities he would not reveal to us to protect their identities. The others he got in the mail, and he has given to me, because he's not very interested in pursuing this business anymore, he's given to me all the original envelopes. And so one of the things we'll be displaying at the conference is copies of the original envelopes, one of which, interestingly enough, has a meter identification from an office in the CIA. And the other was labeled from Freedom of Information Office, Fort Meade. So these are the kinds of places. Now, some of them are just ordinary stamps from ordinary cities, but these envelopes clearly exist. They're clearly original. Clearly, Tim received them just like he said. There has been no duplicity of that sort. In fact, one of the things that we'll be presenting at this conference is the many reasons why Tim Cooper is not a faker, and these documents are authentic.
And for listeners who might not know, Fort Meade is the center for the National Security Agency. And so among what Bob Wood has received from Timothy Cooper over this past decade or so means that you've got 2 mailing origin points, CIA and NSA, and stamps having to do with magic classification, which is linked to the Majestic 12 formed by President Harry S. Truman in 1947. And Bob, on this issue of what you call fakery claims versus authenticity, this is going to be one of the areas in your presentation that you and Ryan are going to do at this X conference. And I think it is important in just the last couple of minutes that we've got on Dreamland Online to tick off what some of the fakery claims are and what you say to rebut them.
Okay, yeah. Over the years, I've tried to listen to all the arguments of the people who are skeptical and try to analyze them. And I know I haven't heard them all, but I've heard 10, and I've identified the 10 reasons that I think that I hear that are phony. And so I just want to rattle off the 10 reasons. First, the government says they're fake. Well, that's pretty obvious that if you have a counterintelligence group, that's what you'd say. The second argument is there's no provenance for them. Well, of course, people who feel that they're violating the law want to conceal their identities. They don't put their return addresses on envelopes. Third is that the archives can't locate them. Well, of course, the archives have been told, and they have a procedure, which we all know is true, to declassify material, and if material is not declassified, then they can't find it. The fourth argument is anything can be faked today, and that's not valid because some of the documents occurred way before we had anything like sophisticated computers and ink. And we've measured the ink, we've checked the watermarks, the paper. Basically, some of these things cannot be faked. The fifth is the argument is the theme is science fiction. Well, actually, that I would say argues in favor of it. The sixth argument is such secrets would have leaked out, and the rebuttal to that, of course, is they do leak out. They are leaking out as we speak. And in fact, the presentation at the X conference by all the speakers this weekend is maybe going to have more people come and leak out. The seventh one is that typos and misspellings prove they're fake. And actually, you can prove exactly the opposite. Either person can bring up enough examples to prove their point on that. One anachronism destroys authenticity, and of course that's not true at all. In fact, we know that one of the normal things that the counterintelligence agencies do is they mix some good in with the bad if they want to create a fake document. So if you get a fake document, you can be pretty confident that 90% of it is probably true, even though it was partly faked. So you can't dismiss a document just because you find one aspect of it that might be fake. And the next argument, the ninth argument of 10, is the War Department logo was discontinued. Well, this was pretty easy to show. I just brought up a 1969 logo that said War Office, and people, were amazed.
And his 10th is, why would government keep ETI life, which is extraterrestrial intelligence life, secret? And one of the presentations I'm doing is exactly focused on what in the Majestic 12 documents that Bob and Ryan Wood have worked so hard for so many years to collect and try to authenticate, going to the very pages of their documents. There is ample evidence, I think, for explaining why, if Harry S. Truman was reading from a field report that they had found bodies dissected as one would a frog in the crash site between Corona and Roswell, that sentence alone would have given any president and any government pause. And I'll be talking a lot more about that in the X conference. And Whitley, I think this is an important event, that we are seeing material that is coming now from so many sources, and you wonder, why is it that they continue in 2004 to keep the most important subject on the planet so locked up?
Well, what was so interesting to me was that sentence that this cannot be allowed when the president apparently was inquiring about it, because it implies a level of secrecy that is literally above the control of the President of the United States. And the suggestion is that possibly if there's too much interference, that an ultimate penalty will be paid. And I have always thought that whoever is out there is, in the end, the source of the secrecy, that it does not originate with any human institution.
And that's a very interesting point. And one thing for everybody listening to Dreamland to know is that there will be yet another extremely serious conference, November 12th to 14th this year. That's a few months away, but it's important for everybody to know that Bob and Ryan Wood are going to have their second annual UFO Crash Retrieval Conference in Las Vegas. Last year's I attended. It was extraordinarily substantive. They're going to have even more this year, and for everyone to know that these men and their colleagues are continuing to do work for all of us in trying to get to the bottom of truths, as you just heard today, about documents and history, and that it's important because the people who were there in the 40s, many have died out. This work is our only real link to the hard facts.
Well, Linda, that's an exciting prospect, and give both of them my very best regards. And I would
yards from our home in 1995. My husband actually saw it first. We have we're high in a mountainside and have a panoramic view of the entire Phoenix skyline, which is kind of neat to look at, and we are quite familiar with what planes look like and car lights and street lights and so forth, and even flares. And one evening he calls me to our window. The whole wall was a window, and says, "Get over here quick." I was in a bath and jumped out of the bath because he never sounds alarmed, and really, literally yards from our property over a private desert area, about 50, 75 feet above the ground, were three amber orbs in a triangle formation. One was on top, and two were very closely aligned underneath. And my first thought, of course, producing videos, was to get my video camera, but I didn't know how long it was going to last. I didn't want to miss anything. So, and something just told me to take it all in mentally. And as I stared at these orbs, and I call them orbs because the light did not extend outside the edge, the size, the color, the shape, and so forth, they were oval shape. There were 3 distinct objects. One was on top and 2 closely lined underneath like a pyramid. The light within each orb was very different than any light I'd ever seen before. It was a very mesmerizing, soft, amber color throughout, uniform throughout. There was no glare at all. I mean, every other light out there glared. There was no hot spot in the middle that usually you see with a light bulb. And I looked underneath to see if anybody was producing this, and it was just dark. And I thought, if I don't get a picture of this, nobody's going to believe it. And I go running to the closet to grab my camera, and my husband calls me back. He says, "Get over here quick, one of them is disappearing." And as we watched, it was extraordinary. The top orb in place, and having watched Star Trek, for anybody out there that is familiar with the Klingon cloaking device, I really took note of if it moved, it did not budge. It didn't waver like the Klingon cloaking device wavers. It didn't take off. It just absolutely rigid in place. It was as if it was on a dimmer switch, and after it disappeared, it seemed like it was still there, but we didn't see it anymore. And I stepped out onto the balcony. I took a picture of the two lower orbs, and immediately noticed an eerie silence, as if time had stopped. It was really extraordinary, and I was staring at these orbs. I mean, just mesmerized. To me, it was very exciting, and I thought it just felt like an intelligent presence was watching. I have to admit that. And the thoughts running through my mind: who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I would love to meet you. Were going through my brain, and the next thing I remember, the left bottom orb started to disappear, and I quickly got a picture of that. And actually, that was the one picture that turned out at the time. Which to me only confirmed that we did see what we saw, and that something extraordinary did happen. But I didn't know what to do with it because I didn't know anybody.
No, because where you were in life right before this happened, and how it came into your life.
Actually, it is intriguing, I must say, and I have felt almost an obligation to do what I've done. My life's work has been education and healing from the time I can remember. My undergraduate work was in secondary science education, and I even began thinking then of community education projects. In medical school I did as well, and they started even a new course concerning going out in the community and giving indigent children immunizations that weren't getting it. I couldn't understand if they weren't coming to the doctors, why weren't they going out to them? And we actually started a course at Temple University Medical School because of my inquiry. And then after medical school, got the idea to do community communications on the news. I thought, if anything, and that's a long story, I won't go into that, of how it came to be, but it was actually going into the indigent areas and seeing that they had nothing, that boarded up homes and one light bulb, but they had their television on all day. And thought, well, maybe we can reach people that way, and went to NBC with an idea, and they thought it was a great one, and started doing health reporting when Jessica Savage and Maura Krim were at the NBC affiliate in Philadelphia, and then an international syndication grew from that, which was wonderful for me because I got to be with my children as they were growing up as much as I could. And then on moving to Phoenix in 1980, started again doing health reporting for NBC, USA Cable, and so actually I was in private practice seeing kids drowning in substance abuse, and felt an obligation to do something constructive and compelling for them. Started my own company, Health Education Learning Programs, and actually the You Make It video and curriculum series that out of my own pocket and time, and it just, for whatever reason, I felt that it was important to do, and with great acclaim and awards and all that good stuff, which is rewarding, but the bottom line is that it really reaches kids by getting the truth out about vital health issues, and I've done an AIDS and teen pregnancy program as well in the You Make It series. And when this happened in 95, actually was the first time that my husband, who's also a prominent physician in the Valley, and I witnessed a very strange occurrence. I had, as well as he, had no interest or knowledge at all in this phenomena. The only movies that we had seen concerning UFOs was E.T. and Close Encounters, which we enjoyed. It was entertaining, and our kids grew up with the wonderful messages. We have two boys, and Star Trek, was a fun thing to watch as a family with the wonderful messages. But other than that, really even stayed away from it because of the scary, portrayals and aliens and all this kind of thing. Just wasn't appealing, and I was too busy anyway doing all my other stuff. So when we did have a close sighting,
This week on Dreamland, we begin a 2-week exploration of what could probably have been the most important UFO event in history, the Phoenix Lights. That's right, the Phoenix Lights. And you've heard them say it was flares. It's all to be dismissed. It was nothing but flares. Not true. A big, fat lie. In fact, a lie, a carefully constructed lie. Don't listen. We're going to be talking to Dr. Lynn Katai, who was the first person to see the Phoenix Lights, and we'll be finding out why, because of Dr. Lynn, who she was, and how she reacted to the Phoenix Lights, this grew into such an enormous event. It all rested on Dr. Lynn Katai. You will find out why. For subscribers, this week we're going to be talking to Julie Ryder, who is a remarkable orb photographer. Now you say, oh, orbs, that's been proved, it's just dust on the camera lens. Not. In the subscriber area, you'll see, for example, diamond-shaped orbs. And why are they diamond-shaped? Because Julie and her group asked them to change shape and then took pictures, and this is what appeared. We are also on Whitley's Journal. There is a new journal about what we're trying to do, and as well for subscribers, a new meditation that begins a series of extremely powerful meditational movements or exercises in communication that work, that are entirely and completely real, and that are effective. So we're going to take this to a new level now, because when you look at things like the Phoenix Lights, when you look at things like the orbs, when you look at things like crop circles, what you are looking at is what the master of the key called conscious energy. It is here, it is making itself available to us, and we can respond in a coherent manner. We can take our experience of life to a higher level at this point. It is possible to do this now. We're also on Mysterious Powers. Anne is going to be talking about dowsing and how the remarkable ways in which this old practice has changed. Now, suddenly there's a dowser who's discovered he can alter events at a distance with dowsing and do all kinds of things with it. Also the same energy manifesting in another way. Read Whitley's Journal to get started on a perspective on this extraordinary energy that is all around us, that is available to us all now as the world changes in an entirely new way, beginning a 2-week process of learning how to think about this energy in a new way and how to communicate with it on Dreamland. This is Whitley Strieber. We'll be right back. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. I'm very pleased to welcome. This came to you just out of nowhere in your life.
Oh, yeah.
Your husband
and
facilitated.
The only reason I remember the date, actually, is because it was the night before my birthday, and I thought it was so cool that this had happened on my birthday.
Now, you tried to communicate in your mind at that point. Did you do that? You just sort of thought these thoughts without any real...
Yeah, it was just thoughts that, and I remember, vividly what I thought, because it really did feel that something was there watching me as closely as I was watching them.
Yes.
The orbs. And I have to say, after they all disappeared as well, that night, for weeks after, for about a month after, as I was outside walking the dogs around our pool area, which these lights were a little beyond that, it really felt like they were still there watching. It just felt like that.
Outside of you, not in you.
No, I mean, it felt like they were still there, where I had witnessed them.
As if they were present but not visible.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And
this is perhaps, and this is the only thing I can relate it to, perhaps they were in another dimension.
How did you feel about, what were your emotional reactions to the feeling of being watched?
It was a little eerie, but I have to say that the experience itself, and I keep going back to that experience in '95 when people ask me about different things that this could have been. The experience was very exciting for me. I just was like flabbergasted that, what is that? I mean, I don't know of any technology that we have that's like this. I've never seen anything or heard of anything that's like this, and yet it was real, and I did get a picture of it. I actually have more pictures that turned out later, but at the time I did have a picture that confirmed that it really did happen.
So at that point then, well, we're going to take a little break. Actually, we're coming up on the end of our first segment together. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland, and when we come back, get set to get deeper into what really is the most extraordinary UFO story of our time. We'll be right back. The Phoenix Lights Essential Reading. Why? Because it shows your interest. The more you read of a book like that, the more your interest becomes known. It is noticed. The Phoenix Lights. Get it from the unknowncountry.com store. Participate in this in every way that you possibly can. Do the meditations. Listen to this material. Read the book. This is Whitley Strieber. We're back with Dr. Lynn. The Phoenix Lights, the single most extraordinary and probably most important UFO event of our times. I know that's a big thing to say, but there were so many women to the program. A very, very special human being, Dr. Lynn Katai. Dr. Katai you may know her as Dr. Lynn of the Phoenix Lights. Dr. Lynn is more than she knows, I suspect, and probably will be surprised to hear that this program is going to connect in very important ways to certain people who will have some extraordinary experiences over the next couple of months. And it is about communication and exactly what does it mean to communicate with other levels of reality. The Phoenix Lights are without a doubt the most extraordinary UFO event in history, and I say that without equivocation. It is the most well-documented UFO event. There have been some really silly and insulting attempts to debunk it, and you may have heard of those attempts. In fact, they were, of course, ballyhooed in all the wrong media places, but you're one of the couple of 100,000 people who listen to this radio program, and therefore you are aware of the fact that that's all a load of baloney, that something very real is happening, and quite a number of you are contactees and abductees, people who are highly sensitive to this, and this is the chance that this communication has to reach out in a whole new way. So I'd really like to welcome the person for whom the Phoenix Lights were lit. Dr. Lynn, welcome to the program.
Oh, I really appreciate that introduction. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Well, it is indeed true. They were lit for you so that you could take this message out. People are selected, I think, very carefully. You were selected for your down-to-earth nature, your credibility, your lack of previous history in UFO material, etc., etc., etc. And now you have created a wonderful book, The Phoenix Lights, which, if you read this book, folks, if you read no other UFO book this year, read The Phoenix Lights. This is not just another UFO story. It's an important communication from a higher level of reality. It is a place to begin if you wish to interact, and interaction is now possible for anybody on this planet. It wasn't before, not even a year or two ago, but you can initiate it if you wish, and if you understand enough about this will be meaningful to you. Dr. Lynn, let's start at the beginning, and as we learn get this amazing story. First, start by telling us